Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. With VOLQ futures having launched on October 5th on CME, James McDonald, CEO of Hercules Investments, will be using them to protect from future declines in tech. James, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thank you.
And September and October certainly are holding up to the reputation of being volatile to the up and downside as a result of COVID-19, a chaotic administration, and stimulus uncertainty. Do you expect more of this through the election and remainder of Q4?
It is likely that the volatility will continue and rise. We have so many different inputs to the market that change perception at the drop of the hat, and these changes are consequential. We are waiting for a vaccine. We are unclear as to the extent of the damage that this virus has had on our economy because it's never happened before. We continue to see repercussions from the business closures that aren't fully accounted for because of the unprecedented stimulus. And so there certainly are going to be many changes that we're going to see coming. And the least of these is not the election. You know, this is a really big deal for this country, not just for the stock market, but socially as well. We've seen unprecedented tension culturally and socially in this country that brought us to the brink of anarchy in many cities. And we've never seen this before. And so this presidential election is going to have a massive impact on the psychology of our nation as well.
And tech was leading the way prior to the pandemic, led us out of it and sets up, well, not just for work from home, but I would argue work from anywhere. And yes, valuations need to be justified. What else has you concerned?
Well, the work from home concept is an amazing concept if you're in the right industry. We call them serendipity stocks, education being one of the areas that globally now we see the need for online education probably more powerfully than ever. What's got me concerned is also global involvement. If we look at the credit of South Africa, if we look at the credit of Brazil, if we look at the credit of Russia, these governments are running out of cash to fund basic needs. And what we've seen in prior crises is the instability that hits our shores starts elsewhere. And so my biggest concern for our economy is those governments getting their financial house in order, balancing the challenge of keeping their nation safe with the virus. And so that's the biggest challenge that I see here in the States. You know, tech is going to continue to lead the way. But if we've looked at prior recessionary environments, you know, the big tech companies, they lose half of their value and sometimes more before they come back. And with the Nasdaq-100 having over 50% of its value in just a handful of names, we want to be particularly careful about either locking in those gains or avoiding losses going forward.
Up until October 5th, there was no direct way to hedge against many of those names. How did VOLQ change that?
I think it's an amazing product. I think it's an amazing idea. And I think it is going to be a fantastic tool for efficient investment managers to add value to their clients. What this tool gives us is an ability to put a solution on the biggest potential problem in most people's portfolios. If you look at the company Apple Computer, what a wonderful American story, but what an incredibly important equity. This company is held in almost 75% of all equity mutual funds, almost 80% of households, and it is the dominant company across the technical landscape. Apple is just one of them. Microsoft is very important as well. Facebook is very important as well. Amazon is very important as well. If you look at these companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Apple, we almost all use their products and services. And because of that, the shares have rallied incredibly. But because of that, they're also disproportionately represented in most investment portfolios. And so VOLQ gives us a way to offset potential losses or potential damage in a portfolio that has done well, but has been attributed mostly to those names.
So what are some of the strategies that you'll be employing?
We want to calculate the exposure to the Nasdaq-100 in a portfolio for a client, particularly with Apple. As I said, Apple is in most equity portfolios. We want to then calculate how much of the attributable gains in that portfolio, assuming there are gains in there, could be wiped out or be damaged if we see a major pullback in the market. And of course, the market has been dominated by tech. And once we have that ratio of quote unquote attributable performance to those tech names, we can then calculate a percentage that we need to buy or sell futures in an account so we can offset potential gains. And so we can make it act like a hedge. And it's a great hedge because it targets where most of the potential weakness is. And so we're going to buy or sell futures in an account for a client that will give us the right proportionate ratio of protection.
So, James, even if you're not a futures trader, why is having a working knowledge of VOLQ helpful to making investment choices? What can it help traders discern?
Well, it's a great question, and it's a tricky question, right? If you know how to do something, you're going to want to do it. And so with futures, let's just start with a real quick explanation. Futures give us the ability to own exposure with a fraction of the cost that we would have to if we bought directly shares. And so with that precept, we want to take exposure in futures to protect or exposure in futures to gain. For someone who wants to just watch it and understand how they can use the information of the VOLQ contract for the portfolio, I think we have to see how it trades first. Sometimes a leading indicator can almost be a lagging indicator if we're not careful about it. And so we want to see how it changes. But the implied concept is that if VOLQ is rising, it may be a good time to focus on protecting as opposed to growing an investment portfolio, particularly with a tech concentration.
Got it, James. Appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.